Hello and welcome to the organ loft of Ely Cathedral. This magnificent organ was built in 1908 by the Durham-based firm of Harrison & Harrison, who continue to look after it to this day. Tonally speaking, the Harrison organ of 1908 would have been quite similar to the organ of St Mary Redcliffe in Bristol, which survives almost unaltered to this day. The organ included some slightly earlier pipe work from the previous instrument by William Hill and stands behind a richly decorated casework designed by Gilbert Scott, which is said to be modelled on that of the nave organ of Strasbourg Cathedral. It wasn't until the mid-1970s that the then organist of the cathedral, Arthur Wills, instigated quite a radical rebuild of the organ so that it could, and I quote, play music from all schools of organ composition. Many of the reed stops are remodelled, the wind pressures lowered, and many of the warmer orchestral Edwardian sonorities of the organ were replaced with some high-pitched upperwork in order to allow the performance of earlier music. Most significantly, the new positive division was added in the lower part of the Scott case to work alongside the remodelled choir division, and I'll demonstrate the two of those together in a second. The organ underwent further cleaning and renovation in 2001, when the opportunity was also taken to slightly adjust some of the additions that were made in the 1970s so that they sort of sat slightly better with the original Harrison pipe work and thereby achieve a slightly better blend and cohesion between all the different choruses and divisions of the organ. In terms of the physical layout of the organ, the great and swell divisions are within the main case, with the positive division below that, and then the console sort of underneath all that, slightly buried away. If you go one bay to the west, we have the great reeds, the choir division and the solo division. And if you go one bay further to the west towards the octagon, you have the solo tuba, orchestral trumpet, and much of the pedal division, with the bottom octave of the double open wood around the corner in the north transept triforium. Given the fact that the organ is so far spaced apart, my colleagues and I need to wear headphones when accompanying the choir or whenever playing for any services, as it's the only way to realistically get any sense of what the organ sounds like in the building, given that the console is buried underneath the main casework, underneath the archway as well. So let's hear some of the individual sounds on the organ, and we'll start with some of the diapasons or principal stops, which form the backbone of the sound of any organ. Let's start with some of the diapason chorus on the swell division. Here's the swell chorus, if you like, up to the mixture stop, which is quite big, but also quite silvery as well. The diapason chorus on the choir division starts with an unusually loud open diapason. Here it is. Chorus up to the mixture. Here's the positive chorus up to the positive mixture stop. Here's the small open diapason on the great. Compare that to the large open diapason. Here's the small open diapason with the principal, so sort of a small chorus. Compared to the large open diapason and the octave. Here's the great chorus up to the sesquialtra stop, an edition from 2001. That's quite useful for playing early English music with that cornet sound in there. But let's swap that for the Forniture 5-rack mixture. I'm going to add the 16-foot board onto that as well. That's a sort of a smaller mixture chorus on the great. If I had the cymbal, the other 5-rack mixture as well, and then the large open diapason just underneath it, it sounds like this. We've actually got a 32-foot sub-board on the great division. This is also playable on the pedal as a softer alternative to the double open wood, but the pipes are amongst the other pipes on the great division, so strictly speaking it's part of the great. I'm going to add that now as well, just so you hear how it sort of binds everything together, just gives a bit more gravitas underneath those massive mixture stops. So we also have a lovely variety of flute stops on this organ. Let's start with the Gedackt on the Swell division, very soft. Could add the Nason flute, 4-foot to that as well. The positive division is based on an 8-foot chimney flute, so called because the pipes have chimneys on the top of them. It sounds like this. Compare that to the 8-foot Gedackt on the choir. Turning back to the positive division, we have the flutes 8-foot and 4-foot, adding the 4-foot Spitz flute as well. Compared to the 8 and 4-foot flutes on the choir, the flauto traversos are more of a sort of warmer romantic sound. And then on the positive, we also have a 2-foot block flute as well. So here are the 8, 4-foot and 2-foot flutes on the positive division. And then I can add the larigot on top of that as well to make a very bright, sparkly sound. And on the choir division, we have a 1-foot flute as well. So here's what it sounds like, the 1-foot flute with a 4-foot and 8-foot counterparts as well. The two flutes on the solo division, the harmonic flute and concert flute, are really beautiful examples. Here's the harmonic flute on its own. The only 8-foot flute on the Great Division is the whole flute, which I believe came from the old William Hill organ, as William Hill included them on a lot of the great divisions of his organ. It's a very large, round sound, but very good for playing a lot of English music. Here it is. I also find it quite useful to mimic the sound of a French horn with this stop as well, because it is so warm and round. So here is the whole flute in its sort of French horn mode, if you like. Using the flutes on the positive division, we can create what's called a cornet sound, very common in organ music. Here's what the positive cornet sounds like if we combine the 5 relevant stops together. So a really nice sort of solo sound, that very clear in the building. We've also got a cornet on the Great Division as well, but it's based on the 16-foot series. So the 5 stops which we would use would be the Bourdon 16, probably the Solitional 8-foot, quint 5 1/3, flute 4, and the double tierce at 3 1/5 pitches. So actually, and again, like on the positive, it makes a lovely solo sound, albeit a slightly different one. Here it is. And in duet with the positive cornet. We also have a cornet on the Swell division, the Echo cornet. It's a 2-rank mixture added in the 2001 rebuilds to replace a sharp mixture stop. Here it is in its sort of solo role. So as you can hear, it's quite a silvery, metallic sound compared to the cornet on the positive and the Great. I also like to use it as a sort of a chorus stop instead of the mixture, particularly when playing early English music. So here it is sort of in its chorus role. No English organ would be complete without some wonderful string tone stops. Here's the Echo Gamba on the Swell. And if we add the vox angelica to that as well, literally angelic voice, that's a celeste stop, so tuned slightly apart from the gamba to create a very shimmering effect. We have quite a large, luxurious string section on the solo division of the organ as well. A whole family of strings, quite well developed, but they're all quite unique in their own way. So here's the two viol stops on their own at 8 foot and 4 foot pitch. Lots of bite and fizz about them, very useful in psalm accompaniment. Adding the contraviola, 16 foot pitch. Adding the viol celeste at 8 foot pitch. And then the string mixture stop, the cornet de viol. This is only one of a handful of examples that Arthur Harrison built on organs in this country. Here's what it sounds like. Adding the octave and sub-octave coupler as well. A slightly unusual feature on this organ is the fifero on the choir division, which is essentially a diapason celeste, whereby it's tuned ever so slightly apart from the open diapason stop to create a very warm, shimmering effect. Here's what it sounds like. Also on the choir division is a flute celeste stop. The undermaris is basically a flute celeste, so you can use that in tandem with the gedakt. The undermaris is tuned just slightly further away from it to create a sort of a shimmering effect. But as I say, on flute stops, this is what it sounds like. And we mustn't forget what is actually my favourite stop on the organ, the solitional on the great. Slightly unusual to see one of these on the great division, but it's such a useful stop and a really gentle one as well at the same time. I use it quite a lot sort of in solos in the left-hand register. Here's what it sounds like. The fourth and final sort of family of organ tone comes from reed stops. The softest on this organ is probably the vox humana, a very distinctive sound. This is a new stop with new pipework from 2001 as well. I'm going to use it with the tremulant, as is often the case. Here's the swell oboe on its own. And then compare that with the cor anglais on the solo, which is quite an early experimental example made by Arthur Harrison, which to me sounds almost identical to the oboe. Here's the orchestral hautboy, or orchestral oboe, which we sometimes substitute in choruses as an alternative swell trumpet, particularly when playing French music. The clarinet on this organ is at 16-foot pitch, and so it serves a useful purpose as a sort of a very quiet, snarling reed in the solo box, but also a lovely solo stop in its own right. It's very, very gentle though. Here it is with the box wide open. The swell reeds are very English, typical Harrison, dark, closed reeds. Here's the trumpet. And then all three swell reeds together. We have a fantastic set of reeds on the great division as well. The pipework for these were all new in 2001, as the previous great reeds had been experimentally remodeled a few times, so it was decided to start again with some fresh pipework. Here's the trumpet on the great. And then all three great reeds together. These are also playable by a transfer onto the solo division and also the pedal actually. The trombone makes quite a useful, softer alternative to the pedal reeds, which I'll demonstrate in a second. Here are the great reeds. Unusually for an organ of this vintage, we have some exceptionally fiery pedal reeds. Here's the trumpet. Here's the bombard at 16-foot pitch. And then the bombardon at 32-foot, or contrabombard. Here are all three pedal reeds together. Here's the tuba on the solo division. This stop spent some time as a fanfare trumpet, but in 2001 was put back to use as a tuba. And then compare that to the orchestral trumpet, which is a white-hot blaze of sound. Here's the full swell division, a very sort of exciting, angry sound. That's quite an exciting sound, but the reeds are quite sort of large and English. So as an alternative, sometimes use a bit of the solo division, use those reeds and take place with the trumpet and the clarion. Here's a combination of solo stops I have set up on a piston ready for psalm accompaniments. So here's equivalent sort of full solo sound, if you like. And then we can modify that slightly by adding the cornet de viol, the viol octaviante. And then if we add that to the full swell division, if I add the solo to swell coupler, then we really get to sort of a good approximation of a French swell division. And unusually, we don't have a sub-octave coupler on the swell division, so actually that's another way of getting just a bit more gravitas to the sound. Let's see what the whole thing sounds like when you couple it all together. And now let's add the tuba and the orchestral trumpet to that tutti as well, and the sub-octave coupler on the solo for good measure. If you want to hear more of the organ being played, I do encourage you to watch some of our live stream services on the Cathedral's YouTube page, on which you'll also find some former organ recitals that have taken place here and been live streamed. We're hoping to have an organ recital series at some point in 2026. So again, do keep an eye out on the Cathedral's website and social media pages for that. Thank you very much for watching.